Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of Three Drams. As always, I'm your host, Matt Healy, coming from potstove.com, and I'm very glad to have you all here for episode 40 of Three Drams. As always, we are bringing three of the finest whiskies from Ireland to your door in a lovely box just like this. If you are a whiskey lover, have a whiskey lover in your life, let them know about Three Drams because we love bringing these whiskies to you. And of course, as always, we bring you the flavor makers and creators who are the ones to be able to tell you all about these whiskies every month. But of course, I'm only here to be the pretty face. I come and join you for the fantastic evenings. I am not the mastermind behind this. That is, of course, the guys in Irish Malts, the O'Donovan brothers, and the team in Irish Malts who put this together months and months in advance. And they are the people to say a very big thank you to, as always. Of course, you try everything we try on Three Drams, you can check out on irishmalts.com. And if you are a subscriber, as always, there is a code going out to you at 9:45 that will be right into your inbox. It gives you a discount on everything that we try this evening. It will ship directly to your door where it is legal to do so, looking at you, United States, with some weird laws. Anyway, outside of that, we have a fantastic evening. We have a takeover this evening from the lovely Keeper's Heart, where we're bringing a taste of the United States all the way to Ireland in a lovely melding of cultures. But as always, I do want to say hello to everyone in the comment section. So I'm seeing friends Martin in Limerick, of course, Kevin in Germany, always joining us. So a very big hello to all. There's a number of people who join us from Germany every month. So a very, very big hello to you. Marissa in Maynooth, very big welcome, of course. Alan from Galway. It's great to see our friends in California that we, of course, have our walking clubs and watching in Shneen. And then, of course, we have the lovely Glanmire Massive coming into us from Cork as well. So of all of our regular watchers, listeners, whatever you might be, a very big hello to you. To our friends who watch back after the fact, whether or not you're on the west side of the globe or the east side of the globe, or you're right here in lovely, dark Ireland, a very big welcome to you. As I said, this evening, we are doing a fantastic takeover where we are bringing probably one of the most well-known names in Irish whiskey outside of those who actually own distilleries to talk to us about a brand new brand on the market that combines whiskey production from the United States and Ireland together in a very interesting way. So without further ado, I'm going to show you our first whiskey of this evening. This is dram number 181. This is a 10-year-old single malt coming in at 43% ABV. But before that, I do want to welcome our guest for the evening for this fantastic takeover, Mr. Jerry Garland. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hi, Matt. Hi, everybody. And thank you to yourself, the O'Donovan brothers, for bringing Keeper's Heart to the masses tonight. Appreciate it.
Not a problem at all. I'm delighted to have you here. As I said, many people in the comment section hopefully will recognize you. As I said, you're probably, outside of people that own distilleries, one of the most well-known people in the whiskey industry, being formerly of Irish Distillers for a number of years, and now you are championing the world of Keeper's Heart. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who is this brand and where are you coming from?
Yeah, so I'll start with myself. For those of you who don't know who I am, as Matt said, my name is Gerard Garland, and I am currently the global ambassador for Keeper's Heart whiskey. So I would have worked with a gentleman called Brian Nation for about a decade, quite closely, speaking on his behalf about the whiskies that he produced in his former role. And he approached me about a bit longer than 6 months ago now, so probably about 8 months ago. I bumped into him at Cork Whiskey Fest on the street, and he said to me, "I'd love to have a chat with you." And I said, "Oh, sure, anytime, Brian." And then he rang me before Whiskey Live and said, "I'd really like you to come over and work at my new venture, which is Keeper's Heart Whiskey." And I said, "Well, that's very nice." And then he basically contacted me a couple of more times, and then a former colleague of ours, Patrick Caulfield, also approached me from Keeper's Heart, and they persuaded me to come on board. And Keeper's Heart is a relatively new brand. It's very new in Ireland. It's not even a year on the market here, or in Europe. And in the United States, it's only been available for just almost 2.5 years. So 2.5 years at the end of this month. It's been available in the US, and so it's a brand new brand from a family called the O'Shaughnessy family. Or we were, yourself and myself, Matt, we're deciding whether we call them O'Shaughnessy or O'Shaughnessy, but both are totally acceptable. If you're this side of the water, it's O'Shaughnessy, and if you're in America, it's O'Shaughnessy. And they own a distillery called the O'Shaughnessy Distillery in Minneapolis and Minnesota, in the middle of the United States, in the second coldest state in the US, after Alaska. And basically, they built a brand new distillery there, about which opened 2.5 years ago. And Brian Nation, over lockdown, basically ordered all the parts and remotely built it, using drones and people on the ground, by staying in contact with them and using VR and all sorts of modern technology. He only visited the distillery when it was well into commissioning, which is absolutely amazing, the things you can do nowadays. So they created a brand called Keeper's Heart, to reflect both their Irish and their American heritage. So the O'Shaughnessy family crest is a little keep, which is a little castle that you retreat through to when you're under attack. And basically, they incorporated that into the logo, which is on the, basically, as you can see on here on the bottle, and there's a little castle right down the bottom or up the top, and then the keeper, as we know, is the person in the distillery that would have kept the keys to the spirit safe. And then you extract the heart of the distillate, and they say their home is in Minneapolis, but their heart is in Ireland. So the whiskies combine both their Irish and their American heritage, and that's where the brand came from. And basically, we're going to taste the three expressions that are available in Europe now at the moment tonight.
Well, absolutely fantastic. I'm going to pull up the image there of the bottle, just to get a greater image on the screen, just so people can see it. And again, that's the keys and the keep you're talking about there in the red center of the bottle, if I'm not mistaken.
That is right. Yes, and that the 10-year-old is, I suppose, the first age expression, and it is a full Irish whiskey. So it's not the other two whiskies that we're going to taste tonight combine both Irish whiskey and an American whiskey. They're essentially a blend of Irish and American whiskey. And whereas this whiskey has been fully distilled and matured on the island of Ireland, but has been bottled in Minnesota. So this the 10-year-old. In fact, all the whiskies are bottled in the distillery in Minnesota. We don't have a fancy bottling line. It's literally 3 people working in the packaging team, and they hand fill the bottles 2 at a time. They label them all by hand. They put the corks in by hand. They put the security seal over them by hand. So yeah, if the label's a little bit wonky on some of the bottles that you might find on Irish malts, which they won't be, but if they are, you understand it's someone that's had a long day.
Exactly. Well, why don't we start with dram number 1 then, and we can get straight into it. So this is dram number 1. This is the 10-year-old Irish single malt heart, coming in at 43% ABV, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct, Matt. And it's also natural color as well, if you have a look at it there. And the thing about this whiskey is that you've got a whiskey that's mainly been aged in refill. It's a triple distilled single malt from Ireland that has been mainly aged in refill American oak barrels. So barrels that have been used to make American whiskey, then used to make Irish whiskey once, and then used to mature the majority of this whiskey. And the age range is about 10 to 14 years before it's finished in Malaga wine casks that have been seasoned with Malaga wine. And they are sourced from a bodega just behind the city of Malaga that produces a sweet, sticky wine. So, Matt, when you're looking at the color, you see this nice golden hue. I'd always kind of think like a hint of orange, because it's the newer European oak, I should say, is giving quite a lot of influence here. You can imagine a barrel that's been used to make American whiskey, then Irish whiskey, and then used to mature this, not going to give much color. but you can see the injection of color from the newer European oak here. And it's Galician oak, and then they're fashioned into essentially into butts, and they're seasoned with Malaga wine for 2 to 3 years, and basically shipped from the city of Cadiz to Great Northern Distillery in County Louth, where the finished whiskey, the final whiskey, is placed into these Malaga wine casks, and they inject what reminiscent of apricot, those burnt orange notes are there. I think it even there's hints of raspberry or blush red berries. You definitely get more of, literally oak, but it's not like toasted. It's more of it's just definitely that distinct kind of profile of oak on the nose.
You're intriguing me too much, Cher. I'm going to say sláinte and jump into the glass now.
Cheers.
I'm dying by it. Cheers.
There's a lovely bit of spice on the front of the palate, but then it's incredibly soft and fruity. It's got good body, for a single malt. It's got a nice, what I would call stable body. It's really well balanced. That spiciness is retained on the front of the palate, and then the wood spice is very soft at the end. It's like a little accent at the end. You get definitely more, again, bitterness. The sweetness is offset by the bitterness of the younger European oak in the whiskey. It's a wonderful, just a wonderful whiskey. It's really nice, a nice drinker. It's delicious. Like anybody that I have tried it likes it, and it has won at the IWSC. It won at the San Francisco Wine and Spirit Challenge. It won Irish Whiskey of the Year, and also at the Las Vegas Spirit Challenge as well, this in 2023. So I didn't have it in time to enter it into the Irish Whiskey Awards, but I will do that this year.
Fantastic. And for me, it's very buttery in the mouthfeel. Like that's probably it's almost that kind of oil, like that creaminess over the palate.
Yeah, and I'm always steering away from that because I know it's not a pot still, but it's a pot still distilled whiskey. But there's definitely body there that you don't expect in a single malt whiskey, and it's 100% malted barley, so that creaminess that you talk about shouldn't be there, but it is there. You feel it. It's like a layer just floating in the middle of your palate in a really pleasant way, and I can feel it very much in my mouth now. And I'm not 100% sure where that is coming from, but it's most welcome.
Absolutely. And so in the portfolio, where, first of all, is it core range? Are we going to see this around for a while?
Yes. So this whiskey, there was only 100 cases, and I agree with Kevin. I love the finish on it. It's amazing how the length in it, because it is not a very punchy whiskey, but there is incredible length. It's still working away in my palate, and I haven't tasted it for a minute or two. It is a member of the core range. There's only 100 cases in Ireland, and we brought it with our distributor partner Barry and Fitzwilliam to the market at the end of October in time for Christmas, and it's available on Irish malts if anybody hasn't got a bottle, and it'll be available on Irish malts for the time being, and when it's gone, it's gone, basically.
When it's gone, it's gone. That's always a great adage, I suppose, because there's absolutely delicious mouthfeel. What would the price point be on a bottle like this?
So depending on the retailer, it'll be somewhere between 100 and 105 euro. So 99 is the recommended retail, but it just depends on the retailer and what way they structure their costs. So it's in around, let's say 100 euro is probably a fair price for it.
Fantastic. So while we just, mull this over on the palate and perhaps set up for dram number 2,
yes,
why don't you tell us a little bit about the distillery? Because obviously we're going to be going into the combination of heritage now between American and Irish whiskies. Is the distillery planning to produce bourbon, malt, rye? Are we going to see blends with Irish whiskey into the future? What are we looking at?
Matt, all of the above. So at the
Okay.
moment, so the first campaign, so when you do a distill one type of spirit, we call it a campaign, and it is the first campaign was a American single malt. Now I'm saying American single malt. There is no definition in American whiskey law, as you well know, Matt, around American single malt. There's no definition around American single pot still, and the rye definition is so broad. You could basically make a malt whiskey, but 1 grain of rye, and it becomes a rye whiskey. So it's that has been reviewed now by the federal authorities in the US, or they're proposing to review it. I think with a lot of influence from the craft distilling movement in the US. But so we're making what you might call in Ireland non-GI or GI compliant whiskey, but that doesn't have a legal definition yet. Technically, it's just American whiskey, but we've done a campaign of American single malt, American single pot still, American rye with pot still distilled rye, and we're in the middle of doing a campaign of American pot still distilled bourbon as well, triple distilled pot still distilled bourbon, and we think it will be the first pot still 100% pot still triple distilled bourbon ever. And in fact, we'll have 4 whiskies that have never been done before in North America, coming out, the first of which in September 2015, which isn't that long away, and it'll be a 4-year-old whiskey, and we're laying down 100 barrels a week. We're doing about 10 fermentations a week, so we're getting 10 barrels per fermentation, and that's 4,500 barrels a year. So it's not insignificant, the distillery. We believe the distillery in Minneapolis, which you can all come and visit. It's open to the public, and it's a really pretty place. If you go on to keepersheartwhiskey.com, you'll be able to look at the distillery and view drone footage of a drone flying around it. But it is a working distillery, and Brian is clever enough to have hired 2 very able distillers to do the heavy lifting for him. So he's more a conductor in the orchestra as opposed to down there getting dirty every day.
The traits of a true master distiller.
Yeah, absolutely.
So looking at that, are for the casking regimen, is it going to be very much reminiscent of other American distilleries that's very much virgin oak forward, or is it a little bit of everything?
Spot on, Matt. And that's what the American whiskey drinkers are familiar with. And also it is the main cask type that you want. Well, obviously with bourbon you have to put it into virgin American oak, and the rye the same, but with the pot still will be in virgin American oak as well as the American single malt. So it's going to be quite interesting because of the rapid influence, or the large influence from the oak in such a short period of time relative to using refill barrels. It's going to be very interesting. I've tasted the rye at 18 months and I think it's fantastic. I would say that though, wouldn't I? I've tasted the bourbon new make. It's really interesting, really buttery, crazy, oily because of the pot still distillation. And then the single malt is about 3 years old. Again, really dark in color, but not overwhelmed by the American oak. And I think it'll be really interesting as flavors develop and acids and alcohol break down a lot of those wood compounds. And the pot still as well, really interesting and very reminiscent of very reminiscent of Irish pot still because it's made that way. But the virgin oak element is what's driving a bit of difference to it. Obviously Brian would have spent a long time making pot still, but he would have also done some work in Bushmills back when Irish distillers owned it. And, he's very familiar with, he's an expert at distilling and he's a process engineer. So he's created some really interesting solutions to problems, particularly with the mash in the wash still, to stop it sticking to the edges, and just by fluctuating the temperature of the distillation, allowing some convection inside the pot still to stop it sticking and burning to the edges of the pot still. because you have to use the mash in the wash still. We can't filter it out, you know. So really interesting place to visit. I mean, it's as I said, open to the public. If there's direct flights from Dublin, Matt, from the 28th of April, so we've no excuse. It's just off University Avenue in Minneapolis on Malcolm Avenue, and it's right next to Surly Brewing. So there's a brewery right next door. Literally, I'm talking 50 feet away. So you can grab your pint of beer and grab your cocktail and enjoy both, straddling both the distillery and the brewery. So it's good crack.
Phenomenal. And before we jump into this, are they using European barley or American grown barley for the single?
It's all going to be from the Midwest. If you're not familiar with the Midwest, it's these big flat areas of the United States where they grow barley and corn and rye and, you know, all of the different cereals, malt. And that's why there's a lot of brewing in the Midwest, because they have a lot of grain and they have a lot of water. Minnesota is known as the state of the 1,000 lakes. So there's 1,000 lakes in the place. I thought Cavan was great with 365, but they have 1,000 lakes. So there's a lot of water. Usually there's a lot of snow, although both times I've been there, it has been very mild, you know, above 0 degrees Celsius. And so I've never seen the snow there. But I believe it does get down to like minus 25, 26, regular enough. But this year has been exceptionally mild. So the Midwest and Minnesota itself would have been a railway hub. So a lot of that grain would have come to Minnesota on its way to Chicago and then on to the rest of the world. It's on the Mississippi River as well. So the Mississippi River flows through Minneapolis. So that river goes, obviously we know, as you know well, it goes from the Great Lakes all the way down to the Mississippi Delta. So that river would have been navigable at one time. So the barley would have been put on, or the grain or cereal or corn would have been put on the river and shipped downstream at one time. So it is ideal from if you're going to put a brewery or a distillery somewhere, it's really the right location because your raw material is all there.
Fantastic. Well, on that, let us jump into dram. Though dram number 2, this is the Irish and the American,
Yes.
coming in at 43% ABV. Now, tell us about this, Ger. What do we have in our glass? Because we're now truly in the blending of heritages here with the two different styles.
So for many years, I've said when you're explaining, you're losing, right? But I'm going to explain this very simply. We're going to get the name for a start changed on the label to say Irish plus American rye, because it is basically half of this whiskey is American rye whiskey, and the mash bill is 95% rye, 5% malted barley, and it comes from MGP in Indiana, and it's been aged in virgin American oak barrels for 4 years. And that whiskey then is shipped up to Minneapolis. It's not that far. Driving wise in America, it's not that far. It's about an 11-hour drive, but in America, apparently that's not far. It's a long way for us. So it's like going to Donegal twice or 3 times. And it is, then the Irish whiskey is pot still, is just over 30% pot still. And it is a 50-50 mash bill of malted and unmalted barley. And then we have a grain whiskey in here, which is just over 20%. And the grain whiskey is corn or maize, as we call it in our part of the world, and is an Irish grain whiskey, single grain whiskey that has been aged in first fill American oak barrels. Barrels have been used to make either Tennessee whiskey or Kentucky bourbon in its previous life. And the pot still and the grain are aged in Ireland. They're put into shipping containers out of the barrels. You can't ship them in barrels. You're not allowed. Once they're shipped out of the barrels, they don't no longer become whiskey in Ireland. It's not allowed. So it's shipped in an inner container, and then the whiskey is blended in the proportions I mentioned to you at cask strength in Minnesota, and then the ABV is reduced down with reverse osmosis water. So water with all the minerals, fluorides, chlorides, everything taken out of it. It's just H2O, down to 43% or 86 proof, as they say in America. And then it is natural color, as I said, because half of this is virgin American oak. We don't need to add any color to it, which is really interesting. You notice it's lighter in color than the last whiskey, and that's because it's all American oak. There's no European oak in here, and I suppose the refill barrels are actually reducing down the color profile of the virgin oak as well.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just going to say sláinte because I'm going to take a little sip of this now.
So you'll notice initially you get what I would call a little bit of spiciness from the pot still on the tip of the tongue. It's quite distinct. Up the front of the palate, it's familiar from an Irish whiskey drinker's point of view. You get a little bit of effervescence from the grain on the side. The creaminess of the pot still in the middle of the palate, but then it kicks into a heightened sense of sweetness around the rye and spiciness from the rye whiskey at the back. And it's got a kind of a cream soda finish. It's not as long as a finish as our first whiskey, but then again, that whiskey was basically a 11 to 15-year-old whiskey. This is a 4 to 6-year-old whiskey, with, I think, great balance, a lot more going for it than you expect. And it is it's a unique style of whiskey. And, people are saying, people have asked, like, why are you mixing the two? It's in America, they're much more accepting of it, I find, than Irish people. And I can totally understand that because we're very proud of our whiskey and we think it's perfect, so we don't need anyone messing with it. But the again, this idea of marrying the two whiskies are basically very, it's something that was actually not that uncommon pre-prohibition, where you would use a proportion of Irish whiskey to and I have seen some examples, physical bottles of these whiskies that were produced in cities like Pittsburgh and even Philadelphia. Matt, there was a distillery there at one time that used to mix whiskey with Irish whiskey with American whiskey at the time. It was a way of them premiumizing it. Now, Prohibition came along, that chain was broken, and it never came back again. But it would have been not that uncommon. And I suppose, again, we just wanted to come up with something new, something different, and being able to literally have the heritage of Irish and American whiskey in the glass. And now there's 4 other whiskey brands in the US that are doing this since we came along. So they say imitation is the greatest form of flattery. And I've tried the other 4, and they're not. I don't think they're bad, but I think our whiskey is much better. So that's all I'm saying.
Well, that's what you need to know there, anyway. No, I love it. I'm going to pull up the bottle again, just so people can see it. I think it's great for the example of layering, because with this, it's fantastic. You can really get both on the nose and at the top of the palate that MGP grain, like that rye characteristic. On the nose, it's herbal and that kind of almost. I was thinking it's kind of almost like dried cured meats, like kind of you're almost rare, kind of going into kind of pastrami area or something like that.
Yeah.
And then on the palate, you get all that big spice in the background. But underneath, again, you've got, as you said, that sweet grain whiskey from Ireland, and then that pot still whiskey as well. You can almost taste the layering of the whiskey, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, and I've done some tastings with the component elements of the whiskey, and you're absolutely right. You can call them out. Dave Perkins worked on this with Brian Nation to put it together, formerly of High West. And so Dave was a consultant blender on this with Brian, and he obviously, I think he pushed quite strongly for the Irish grain to be included. And when I asked Brian why that was the case, because we could have just had the rye and the pot still together. Brian said that they were so distinct in the glass together that you could pick them out too easily. What the grain does is it almost is like a bridge between the two of them. So they work together in harmony. And, the grain, as you said, it's sweet, but it doesn't add a huge amount of flavor to the whiskey. But what it does do is it finds elements in both the whiskeys and brings them together. And so it's quite interesting from that point of view. I think that they initially came up with the idea of not having grain in it and then put it in because it was felt it needed to be that bonding block between the two distinct styles of whiskey.
Absolutely, and you can see it working in the glass. It's absolutely fantastic. We have some questions in here. The first in from Roisin, wondering what is the price point of this whiskey?
So this whiskey is available on Irish malts, as I said, and it's €50 as far as I know, a bottle.
And of course, if you are a subscriber to 3 Drams, you will have that discount code in your inbox in 13 minutes, where you'll get it for a lovely discount. And Ger will be delighted to hear that it's a discount provided by Irish Malts, and Ger's margin isn't cut at all. So he's very happy with that.
Well, I think that's a great benefit. That's a great benefit for everyone, and I think you won't get them at that price anywhere else, except on Irish malts with that discount code.
Exactly. Conor O'Hare, one of our friends, distiller up in Cooley Distillery, wants to know, will it be available in the north of Ireland? He seems very keen to be getting his hands on a bottle.
Yeah, absolutely. I plan on getting it. Basically, I'm just going to, at the moment now, it's only available in some on-trade outlets, generally in the Belfast area. It's not available in any off-trade outlets at the moment in Northern Ireland, but I will be correcting that before the end of, I suppose, the first end of the half year. So I've just got to, unfortunately, with the two different jurisdictions, I have to just find someone that I can partner with in the north of Ireland in the near future, which I am in the process of doing. So I can promise you I will get that sorted. But in the meantime, Irish malts is definitely your solution there for the time being.
Exactly. Conor, ship it to yourself in Cooley. It'd be grand. Don't worry about it. So with that, then I suppose going forwards, we're looking at this melding of American grain, or American rye, the Irish grain, the Irish pot still. When the distillery has its own rye whiskey and its own pot still, will these expressions continue, or will they become kind of more of an in-house style blend, or maybe just go into the pure elements that they came in?
Well, just to explain why we partnered with Great Northern Distillery and also with MGP. Well, the reason was the quality is there. There's a reason why so many different whiskey brands use these two distilleries as suppliers, and also they are scalable. So as the brand grows, they're able to supply us with exactly the same whiskey going forward, so that a whiskey drinker that becomes fond of Keeper's Heart and its flavor profile won't get a shock, because we have to switch to another supplier or another distillery. As I said, the quality is there. It's a fork in the road that we have to come to, and I think that decision will need to be made, and it won't be made 2025, 2026, because the rye and the bourbon won't be available till rye will be back end of 2026 and in early 2027. So the rye and the bourbon won't be there as components of the whiskey. So we'll have the pot still, and the malt will be a standalone product. Currently, we're not going to have a 10-year-old by then. And this is an Irish whiskey, as I said. So I think it's something that will be decided. But the whiskies that will be distilled by the distillery, there's going to be, as I said, 4,500 odd barrels each year available of those. And obviously with the Angel share, with, not all of those barrels may be suitable. They also, we might want to keep a proportion of them for longer. Maybe 30% of them will leave for much longer to mature for future age releases. So I think I'd be hoping the brand will be big enough, Matt, that we probably will be under pressure that we won't be able to use our own whiskey because there won't be enough of it. That's my guessing of it. These will remain, the 3 whiskies that you taste tonight will probably remain part of the core range. And there is 2 other whiskies available in the US, a cask strength version of the last whiskey we're going to try, and 110 proof version of the Irish and American, which are available in, as I said, in the US for the time being. But I'd love to bring them to Ireland at some stage once we grow the brand. So the answer is I don't know, and for the reasons I've explained. But it's exciting that we'll have to make that decision in 2 years or 3 years time. So that's where it's going anyway.
Absolutely. Well, I think that brings us very swiftly on to dram number 3, where we have gone from the white label to the very stylish black label. This is Dram number 3, the Irish and bourbon from Keeper's Hearth. Not to be confused with the Irish and American we just had. That's the white label. Now this is the Irish and bourbon. Jer very carefully caressing his bottle. So why don't you bring us through that as I crack this open and give it a little pour in the glass?
Well, first off, the color. Look at the difference in color, because this is 60% bourbon. So, and as we all know, bourbon has to be aged in virgin American oak. So the extra 10% of essentially new American oak is adding a lot more color to it. And when you nose it, toffee, vanilla, toasted wood, it's all of those American, whiskey type notes that you expect. But subtly, you can see it's softer. It isn't as loud or maybe as spicy as you get with a bourbon, with an American bourbon. And it's got something is just toning it down a little bit. And that's the introduction of pot still whiskey of about 24% pot still, and then the remainder is grain. So the pot still and the grain are toning down the American whiskey. But what they're also adding is some body to it as well. It's an absolutely delicious whiskey, and I've no problem saying that. So have a little taste. Sláinte.
Sláinte.
And if Matt hadn't told us that it was 46% or 92 proof in American, you would probably think it was a 43 or 42% whiskey. It is, again, I think you've got a lot more wood sugar in here. You've got basically a little bit of spice from the pot still, as I said at the front. The grain is almost, I think, hidden in the sweetness and all of the new oak influence. It transitions across the palate quite sequentially. And then when you get to the back end, the new American oak kicks in, as well as all of that vanillic acid. And it gives you a little bit of spice at the end. But it's not taking your breath away. You know yourself when you try quite a youthful craft bourbon, it can be a bit punchy. This is really drinkable and very moorsome. Definitely is a nice dryness in the front of the palate as well. It's just a great sipper. I mean, if you wanted to elevate this, Matt, when you're sitting out in your veranda overlooking the Irish Sea with your shotgun over your arm, looking out at the dolphins swimming along, put it into a rocks glass on a nice cube of ice and just a twist of orange just to elevate the drink. It works really well. It makes a great old-fashioned, absolutely. But, I mean, you can imagine yourself drinking a good, nice, responsible pour of this and enjoying it outside in the summer. It's a really good drinking whiskey. They work quite well. For me, this one I think is the one that's the most, not an everyday whiskey, but a whiskey that you wouldn't mind having every day. It's that type of whiskey.
And I'm very much liking that interplay between the bourbon, the virgin oak. You said that wood sweetness, but yet it's juxtaposed by, you said, that dryness at the front of the palate, which is very interesting.
Yeah, it creates this kind of circular idea in your head that you want to experience it again. It's really quite pleasurable.
Absolutely. Mike D wants to know, is he going mad, or is he tasting a salty sweetness to this? Could be going mad, Mike, but everyone's palate is subjective.
That's exactly it, Matt. Like I pull out general things here, but like as you mentioned earlier with the rye, with the Irish and American rye, I'd never thought of that sort of I don't know what you call it, cured meat type flavor. And you're absolutely right. In the Irish and American rye, I was like, oh my God, I've never tasted that before. But it's everybody's palate's different. So Mike maybe just a bit more attuned to kind of that kind of saline type note to it. But I can guarantee you there's no salt added. There's nothing added to this, but bar it's a high enough corn content that could be maybe why it's leaning towards, I don't know what you call it, maybe not a salty note, but a kind of a saline note. It's 71% corn. The rye is about 19%, and then the rest is malted barley. So that could be the reason. I think maybe just the high corn content could be driving it. It's a tasty mash bill, and we've kept the same mash bill just in case with the pot still distilled bourbon as well. So we didn't deviate from that just in case we do actually end up using it in the future as a blend.
Absolutely. I'm seeing Roisin now saying she's getting white pepper rather than black pepper with a silky caramel with it as well. So you're seeing a full gambit you've got full gamut of flavor profiles here. But one of the things that's nice about this as well is we're melding different styles of whiskey, and with whiskey and wine and even beer, a lot of us are very much pre-programmed into boxes. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that everyone is. Even the people who work in the whiskey industry have boxes that they go to and look for. And I think the combination is great because it's pulling flavors out of boxes that you maybe normally wouldn't be looking for, and it's bringing to the fore of the palate. And you're seeing some really nice different flavor profiles coming here. Martin saying he also gets the saline note. Mike saying he's continuously getting the saltiness to it as well. So I'm loving seeing the different interplay of the flavor profiles.
Yeah, I definitely think it's funny because you expect it to be super sweet because when you nose it, it's got that toffee vanilla note, but it's not as sickly sweet as sometimes bourbons can be. Like you feel like you're some of the craft bourbons I've tried, you'd nearly feel, that they were almost they've got sugar syrup in them. They're so sweet. But with this, definitely, I think you're not getting any color addition for a start. You're not getting any. I think the sweetness on the nose doesn't translate to the palate, which is a good thing. It's kind of, it's unexpected.
Well, let me ask you this. So you've got an American and Irish whiskey melded together, made in the United States in a market that understands bourbon. And obviously Europe is a market that understands Irish whiskey to an extent, Scotch whiskey very much to a greater extent. Is there a point at which the recipes need to be tweaked to make them more familiar to either side of the market, or will they always be the same recipes going forward? Like if the Europeans aren't familiar or are used to drinking the bourbon profile, is there come a point to tone those down to bring in more of the Irish influence, or is Keeper's Heart steadfast in their blending processes?
Listen, whiskey is a living thing, and people change, and so absolutely, it's not just Brian. There's Kate Douglas, who's the head distiller, and then Chris, who's her assistant, that also used to work in High West or Old Elk back in the day. So that's where they came from, and they came from brewing before that. So they're very much working with Brian all the time to. They have a sensory panel there, and they are constantly tweaking it. So whiskey is, by its nature, every barrel is different. So every batch, even though the blending team in Great Northern do a great job of trying to deliver a consistent pot still product and a consistent grain product, you are going to see slight variations in them. So they can lean into things, that feedback that they get from doing whiskey shows or from like we're doing Cork Whiskey Fest this year. We're going to be doing which Irish malts are a sponsor, by the way, and we're doing Whiskey Live in Dublin this year. But in the United States, we're doing whiskey events all the time, all over the 22 states that we're distributed in. and originally we were only the first year in 4 states, so we had quite a narrow kind of view of what the whiskey was. Now it's much broader from all of us feeding that back. So what I'd say to you is that I think if there are characteristics within the whiskey that people are particularly liking, whether it's the kind of saltiness or, you know, it's like the sweetness in the rye, or it's the apricot in the 10-year-old, they'll be accentuated in future batches, you know. So I think no two batches are the same when they're, you know, but the skill of the blender is to make it so subtle that you don't even notice, but you still like the product. So I would say to you, if there are characteristics in it that people are loving, I'd say definitely they could change the proportion slightly, or, you know, make the blend lean towards a certain flavor that people are interested in. So it's not gonna, you know, this is why it's so interesting always tasting whiskey from our first batch of whiskeys, which were in a this is a mold, so they had to get a company to design this bottle, and the mold cost over $100,000, I think, which is, blows my mind. But these molds to make the bottle, all our bottle, we only have one bottle. So, but our original bottles were an off the shelf bottle that they purchased from a bottle supplier, and I've been lucky enough to try some of the early stuff, and you can see slight differences if you're really nerdy, but that goes for any brand, you know. So, well,
Martin saying signed up for your masterclass at Whiskey Live. Will he be seeing yourself or Brian Nation at
both of us? So Brian Nation is traveling over for Cork Whiskey Fest. He'll be in Cork. I'll give you his home address so you can all call down to his house for a cup of tea. So it's in Blarney. No, he'll be at Cork Whiskey Fest, and then he'll be coming back to Ireland for Whiskey Live in May as well. That's for definite. Yeah, he is. He's flights booked. He's no hotel in Cork because he's a house in Cork, but he is. He's probably going to stay with his mammy anyway.
Oh, fantastic! Well, I've a couple more questions for you. If you've been tasting along with us, make sure you do as exactly Roisin has done here. Let us know in the comments section your favorites of the evening in descending order, because we do this only to see what everyone liked, because everyone's palate is different. There's no winner or losers in the evening. We know we've had a fantastic time. Firstly, the whiskey we've just tried, I'm going to bring the bottle up one more time here. What is the RRP, the recommended retail price on the Irish bourbon?
It's the same price as the Irish and American rye. So it's in €50 mark. But again, as you said, Matt, there's a discount code coming into people's email boxes very soon.
Yeah, it landed 4 minutes ago, so they should have them now already. Perfect. And I think if you're on Irish malt, they actually save 5 cents. I think it's, from memory, it's $49.95. So, you know, you buy enough that those 5 cents will add up to a whole new bottle.
That's true.
That's you call depletions, Jer. No. But before you go, I have 2 more questions for you. One, as a general, I suppose, business of coming into the market with these brands, do people get it in Europe? Because I think you said before that the people in the United States kind of get the idea of blending the two nations. Do Europeans understand it? Are they getting it, or is it more of an education piece before anything else?
I think definitely. Look, there's no doubt about it. People are, you know, is it Irish whiskey, is it an American whiskey, you know? But very much it says all the information on the label. But as we all know, people don't read labels, which is fair enough. I totally get that. But when people taste it, they do get it. And I think everybody, which thank you very much everybody for joining tonight, would agree that they taste great and they are quality whiskies. But yes, people have questions about, you know, how much of it's American, how much of it's Irish. But hopefully, as you can see from my answers to Matt's questions tonight, and also the questions you asked, we're totally transparent about everything. So there's nothing being kept back about where it's from, what the, literally the makeup of the whiskey is or anything like that. We're very happy to tell everybody everything from the mash bill to, the proportion within the blends and all that sort of stuff. So the TTB were the only people that stopped us in America from putting on the percentages on the label. And the TTB, which is the Trade and Tax Bureau in the US, they govern kind of labeling around liquor in the US. So we're trying to get our labels changed to have even more information on them. So the TTB has got, I think they've 10 times they've increased their workforce or something like that. Because of they're so busy, they've had to really increase it. And there's a little bit of them just really trying to figure out what they were doing. So I think in the future, if you get a chance and you have your bottle of A Keeper's Heart, just have a read of what's on it at the moment and you'll get a lot of information off it. And I think once you taste it, as I said, I think people get it.
Fantastic. So as we're going out the door, give me one thing you think is cool about the distillery that you'd like the distillery itself, not the whiskey, because the distillery looks phenomenal. You have to Google it, guys. It's phenomenal and it's huge, by the way. I've seen that drone video a number of times. It's also fantastic. But having been there in Minneapolis, tell me one cool thing that strikes you or you get to explore, something hidden that you think people should look out for when they go to the distillery.
Oh yeah, well, I think definitely it is, for me, is that they can make all of these different styles on one site. I find that really interesting. There's many, they can make pot still distilled whiskey. They have a big Vendome still, a huge big 14-inch column Vendome still. They have a vodka and a gin column. They have, and I think from a production point of view, the way it sits side by side with the restaurant, the bar, I think that's what I love, is the dynamism of that. You can literally see into the production area from the restaurant and the bar, and vice versa. When you're up doing your tour, you can see into the people having drinks and having cocktails while you're getting a tour around the place. So that's what I really like about it. Again, it's transparent, it's open, and it's only closed on Mondays, so don't go there on Mondays.
Terrible. Talk about a bartender's weekend. Huh? Well, you're going to have a distiller's weekend then. So, well, Jared, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. These are my first time tasting Keeper's Heart whiskey. I imagine a lot of people's first time tasting as well. I am thrilled to taste these blends. They're so much more intricate and so flavorsome than I could have imagined they would have been. So I'm delighted that the outlet of 3 Drams is how I and a number of other people are able to taste it. Because as I said, I do none of the background work. I hold my hands up. I am just here to talk whiskey and drink with you lovely folks. It is the O'Donovan brothers and their teams in Irish Malts who put in a tremendous amount of work getting all of these packs both decanted, bottled, and also shipped around the world. So a very big thank you to them. To you guys watching at home, thank you so much. I appreciate you letting us know in the comments section what your favorites are. For those watching at home after the fact, hello to you if it's a good morning in Brazil, good evening to you if it's evening time in Tokyo. To our friends in Australia, a very big hello to you guys as well. Don't think we've forgotten about you. Let us know in the comment section after the fact. We love knowing what your favorite whiskeys were going on, because right now number 2 has won out in the comment section as the most favorite. With 3 and 1 putting up their own showing, but 2's definitely of the people commenting the favorite. But as I said, everyone's palate is different, so that's just for our own fun. We do that every 3 Drams, so it's great to see. Thank you very much. And Jared, to you, a huge thank you. I know you have an incredibly busy schedule, bouncing around the world with this, so I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you, you too, Matt, and for everybody tonight for joining, and hope to see you all soon.
Fantastic. Good night.
Good night.